Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Love From Lizi's July 2020 card kit. Unfortunately, this kit has already sold out, but there are still some add-ons available, and I will add a link in the description box if you want to check any of those out. The only way to guarantee receiving a kit is to sign up for the monthly subscriptions. Let's go ahead and get started with card number 1. And a huge apology, I lost the footage for creating most of this card. I'm not sure what happened. So I have some pearlescent paper for the background. I double matted the layers using some pink and gray. The image in the center is one of the 4x4 cut-aparts that's included on the 12x12 paper. And then I added a few Love From Lizi peel-offs across the back of the card just for a little extra sparkle. And I did trim down that 4x4 cut apart just a little bit so it would fit nicer on the background. I'm adding a few of the sequins in the upper right hand corner. And I'm just adhering these using some art glitter glue. And then just a finishing touch, I'm using the Nuvo drops that are included in the kit. This is the Morning Dew color. These are really pretty. They dry clear, but they add that little extra detail. So I'm just going to sprinkle those around the sentiment and also the flower. And then I'll also add a little bit of sparkle to the flowers. So I'm using a Nuvo shimmer pen, just in the clear color. I love this cut apart. This card overall is very simple, but I think with that beautiful cut apart, that's all that was really needed. So now moving on to card number 2, I'm going to use a card sketch by MFT. It's number 431. And if you are interested in any of the sketches I show, I have all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is provided in the description box below. I selected this green paper for the background. It looks like cracked paint on a wall. And then I have some beautiful floral paper for this smaller strip that goes on the front. I'm layering all of this with some green cardstock. And this is a cardstock that I had in my stash. It has a pearlescent finish on it. It's really pretty. I'm using the sentiment Thank You. This was included on the stamp set that comes with the kit. There is also an add-on stamp set that has more images and sentiments. And this font is just beautiful. So I stamped it on some white cardstock. I'm going to layer it on the same green cardstock. And instead of adhering it to the top, as indicated in the sketch, I'm actually going to do it a little bit lower. I didn't want to cover up a lot of the flowers, and I think it looked balanced better toward the lower part of the card. So I put some scrap cardstock on the left hand side where it goes off of that floral paper, just trying to keep everything nice and level, and then use some liquid adhesive to adhere it. Now I'm going to use one of the wooden pieces that's included in the kit. These are really pretty and have a nice detail. You could use them plain, but I like to add a little bit of decoration. So I'm going to do some heat embossing. I'm using Love From Lizi's Copper Rose embossing powder. So first I just pushed that wood piece into some Versamark ink and then sprinkled the embossing powder on top. And now I'll just heat set that with my heat gun. And now it has this beautiful color, and it was really hot when I was trying to touch it at first. So I just let that cool for a moment, and then I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back side so I can glue it onto my card next to the sentiment. I'm using Ranger's Multimedia Matte to adhere this wood piece down. And then I'll grab a few more of the sequins. Sticking with this cream color, I'll put 2 of them in the upper right hand corner. I had one sequin that didn't have the hole punched through the center, and it just looked odd to me, so I had to pull that one away. And now just one final finishing touch, I'm going to add the Nuvo drops, just sprinkling them around the flowers. Some of them I'll put in the center of the flowers. I really love this clear color. It just adds a beautiful detail. And there is my finished card, and this is card number 2. Now moving on to card number 3, I won't be using a card sketch this time. One of my favorite papers in the whole kit is this paper with a bunch of colored doors on the background. I wasn't sure how I was going to use it since it's a very busy paper. I used some of the green cardstock for this strip to go across the card, and then just to add some separation between those two pieces, I'm using the peel-offs in the black color. This is the straight style, so it's a little wider than the usual pinstripe. It's about 1/8 of an inch wide. I'll just tuck the ends behind on that panel, and I was ready to adhere this onto this black pearlescent paper, but I remembered I wanted to add this circle and I wanted to overhang off of the left. So I want to work on this first, and I cut this scallop circle out of that black pearlescent paper since you're not going to see that opening. And then I also have a banner cut out of that scallop circle, but I end up not using it on this card. I changed my mind, so I'll just save it for another thing. So I'm going to adhere this circle die cut. I did put a scrap of cardstock on the upper portion just to keep it nice and even. And then I put it flush to the left-hand side, flipped over the paper, and just trimmed off the extra. Now for the image, I'm using one of the cut-aparts. So there's a full 12 by 12 sheet of cut-aparts. It's basically a full sheet of ephemera. You just have to cut them out yourself. So I cut out this vintage mailbox in this reddish color. Thought that would look really nice with the doors. I'm adding some of the blue skinny ribbon to the top of the card. I adhered some 1/8 of an inch score tape down first, and then I'm adhering the two pieces of ribbon. And sorry that the lights dimmed just a little bit there. We have an older house, and if anybody runs the microwave while I'm recording, it'll dim my video lights. I try to remember to put a note on the microwave that I'm recording, but sometimes I forget, or sometimes people don't notice the note. Luckily, that doesn't happen very often. So once I have the ribbon adhered, I'm going to tie the bow independently. I find it a little easier rather than wrap it around the card. I'm just going to tie that bow, and then I'll adhere it to the card using some glue dots. I'm going to trim down the tails a little bit. I'm just using some small glue dots, and I even folded that in half. Just don't want it sticking out from the bow because it'll stick to whatever's put on top of it or the envelope later. I'll use some liquid adhesive to adhere the mailbox, and I'm putting it slightly angled. Thought it would look a little nicer than straight up and down. I'm using the add-on stamp set with the sentiment hello. Already gone ahead and stamped this out. Cut a fishtail on the right hand side, and then I'm going to tuck it slightly underneath this scallop circle die cut. So this glue dries very quickly, but there is a little time where you can still move things around a bit. I'm pulling out those Nuvo drops again, just adding a few around the image and the sentiment, and then a couple on that mailbox. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 3. Now moving on to card number 4. I'm using a sketch from MFT. This is number 494. And this is a fun sketch because you can feature a pattern paper in that large oval. This pretty floral paper is another favorite from the kit, so I really wanted to make sure it would be featured on one of the cards. I selected this green wooden panel paper for the back piece. And then I'm going to add the green peel-offs that are included in the kit. This is the glitter in the straight style. And I didn't run them all the way across since the middle part's going to be covered up with that oval. I'll adhere this on some cardstock. And this is also a scrap of cardstock that I already had. The color matched that darker pink flower really nicely. And then using some scrap cardstock, I'm going to add a little piece to the top and lower portion of the oval, just where it goes off of that green wooden paper. I'll put some ATG tape on the back and then adhere this to my card front. For the sentiment on this card, I'm using one of the stickers that's included in the kit. I thought this would make a lovely wedding card. So the sentiment is happily ever after. And I am adhering it onto some cardstock just for some extra stability. And I'll be placing it to the right hand side on that oval. I decided I wanted to layer it on the green cardstock instead, so I'm just going to peel this off of that white cardstock because it really didn't need to have the double layer. And then just to make sure it's still going to stick, I put a piece of score tape on the back side and then trim that down. I put a small thin foam square on the right hand side of the sentiment, but it turned out to be too thick. So I pulled that off, and instead I'm going to just use some scrap cardstock. I wasn't sure if I needed 1 or 2 pieces. Ended up I only needed 1, so I pulled off the other one. Put some ATG on the back, and now I can adhere it to my card. And I'm going to add a small banner in the upper left hand corner. Kind of brings out some more of that green and balances out the card. Now I'm using some of Love From Lizi's brand new peel-offs. These are the mini hearts. She has several different colors available, and on each sheet they come in 3 different sizes. So I'm using the smallest size. So I have 2 of them, and I'm just overlapping them and put them next to the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 4. Now moving on to card number 5. Another favorite cut apart is this vintage mailbox on the brick wall. And it's a very faded looking brick wall. And I'll be adding it to another pattern paper that has a darker print of a brick wall, but I want to make sure that it stands out. First, I'm going to add some rose gold peel-offs around this cut apart, and I did trim down this cut apart just a little bit so it's smaller than the 4x4 size. I used the widest width of the peel-off, and I have it going off of the edge, and now I'm going to use an X-Acto knife and miter the corners. This is a trick I learned from Lizi, and I love it. It's a great way to use those peel-offs. So now it creates this beautiful frame. And then I'll be layering both of these pieces on some black cardstock. It'll really add that contrast and separation. So even though I have 2 different patterns of a brick wall, I think it still turns out really nice. I'm also going to add some black ribbon. I'm going to put 2 rows on the bottom of the card. So I have the 1/8 of an inch score tape, adhered that down, and then I'll cut the ribbon. Rather than wrap it around the card, I wanted to make sure I would have enough ribbon for all of my cards. So I'm trying to conserve a little bit here. I'll just wrap those ends around, add a piece of score tape just to make sure they don't come off later. And I'll peel off the back of the score tape, add some more ATG, then I can attach my card front onto a card base. And just to save on time, I've already gone ahead and stamped out the sentiment, and I did it on the back side of the cut apart 12x12 paper. It has a very subtle image on the other side. So it's not white, but it has a distressed look to it. So I stamped it with some black ink, and I'm just doing a fussy cut around it. And then I'll adhere it to the lower corner of that cut apart. I decided I wanted to pop up this whole panel. So I'm going to cover the back with some foam tape. I'll make sure to get good coverage. And then I'll adhere that above that black ribbon. I'll leave a little bit of a gap on the upper portion of the card since I'm going to add something there later. And I was trying to figure out placement. I ended up going back to what I had before. Then I was ready to use the black ribbon to tie a bow, and then I remembered the kit includes a couple of pre-tied black ribbon bows already, so this was perfect. Just put some glue dot on the back and adhere that. I did trim the tail just a little bit since it was rather long. Put some liquid adhesive on the back, adhere the sentiment. Then I'm going to pull out some more of Love From Lizi's new peel-offs. So she has hearts, stars, and also circles. So I wanted to add some of the stars. I'm using the black glitter, but they blend in too much with the little seams between the bricks. Not sure what those are called. So then I switched to the circles. I'm using one of each of the sizes, going from the largest on the outside to the smallest on the inside. And these are really nice if you don't want to add extra dimension to your cards, because it'll still add some shine or some glitter depending on which style you select. And I'm going to finish off the card using some more of the Nuvo drops. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 5. Now moving on to card number 6. This sketch is from MFT, it's number 490. I'm using that green wood panel paper for this smaller rectangle, and then the back side of the cut apart for the background. So I'm going to layer this first piece on some of the gray cardstock, and then I'm going to do a double matted layer for the background piece. So first I'm going to put it on the green and then also on this gray. And this gray cardstock is one of Love From Lizi's add-ons. She has a textured cardstock bundle and also a pearlescent cardstock bundle. I love having lots of paper, so I always pick up both of those bundles. So I'm going to put my card front onto a card base. And then I'm using some peel-offs. I have the green in the straight design and then the same color in the pinstripe. I wanted to have that really thick width and then a little thinner width. So I'm just putting those on the bottom, and I should have done it before I added it to the layer so I could have wrapped the ends behind, but this still worked out fine. I just used my X-Acto knife and trimmed off the edges. And I'm going to add one of the cut apart images. It's a beautiful bouquet. I'm just going to pop it up using some thin foam squares. Made sure to get good coverage so there isn't an area that sags. And then I'll adhere that cut apart onto the green wooden background. For this sentiment, I'm using the add-on stamp set, and this is, "While we are far apart, you are always in my heart." Thought that was very lovely. I stamped it on some light green cardstock. I was ready to adhere it, and I decided I wanted to cut some fishtails on both of the ends first. And I also popped this up using some thin foam squares. And then some finishing touches, I'm using some more of the new heart peel-offs. I selected the medium size, and I'm putting one heart on both ends of the sentiment. And then I'll pull out the Nuvo drops, just sprinkling those around the flowers. They don't show a lot, but it does add just that little extra detail. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 6. Now moving on to card number 7, I'm using a sketch from Queen & Company. I have all of the pieces cut out. This just saves on time on this video. Using that same green wooden panel. This is from the 12 by 12 paper. It's also in the 6 by 6, but having that full 12 by 12 sheet gives you a little bit more paper to work with. I did double layer that, use some of the white pearlescent paper and then also some of that green cardstock. Then I have 2 different pattern papers, use some stitched banner dies to cut these out. Just gonna follow this sketch fairly closely. And I am putting a little bit of liquid adhesive around the edge of this banner just to make sure that it stays down on my card. I've noticed with some dies that have that faux stitching, they warp just slightly around the edge, so adding a little bit of liquid adhesive just ensures that they're going to stay in place. I used some light green cardstock for this rectangle piece with the rounded corners, and that's where I'm going to add my image. I cut out the little windmill using some specialty cardstock. This was from a previous Love From Lizi add-on. I always save those scraps, as you never know when one will come in handy. I was going to add the sentiment "Thinking of You." I had stamped it out on some white cardstock and fussy cut it, but it really stood out too much. So I decided to use this same green cardstock. I flipped it over since that cardstock has some texture on one side, and I wanted it flat so that way I could get a good stamped impression. I'm just going to pop it up using some foam squares, and then I'll adhere it underneath the sentiment. So it's a little bit wider than that rectangle. And then for the banners in the upper right hand corner, I just used some more of that green cardstock that has a little bit of shimmer to it. I thought about adding the stickers. There's a couple of banner stickers included in the kit, but I think the floral design was just a little too busy. I'm going to pop up all of these using some thin foam squares. And on the sketch it does have 4, and I decided to just go with the 3. So once I have those in place, I can add a finishing touch, pulling out those Nuvo drops again. Can you tell I really like these? I'm putting 2 of them on each of the banners, and then I'll put a couple of them above the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 7. So now moving on to card number 8. This sketch is by Viva La Verve. This is their May 2018 sketch. I have 3 different pattern papers I'm going to be combining on this card. I have that beautiful flower paper for the background, using this green chipped or cracked paint for this long banner. And then there's a tone-on-tone pink paper with a map printed in the background. So before I adhere this pink paper, I'm going to put some scrap cardstock on the right hand side, just where it goes off of the edge of that green paper. And then for the strip that goes across the card, I had a small scrap of this pink cardstock that I used on, I don't know if it was card 2 or card 3. So this is all I had left of this color, but it matches so nicely with that pink flower. I'm going to put some cardstock on the ends where it goes over those other layers. I did end up putting 2 layers of those little scrap cardstock pieces. And now I'm pulling out my favorite peel off color. This is the pink holographic peel offs. I'm using the thinnest width and just putting a piece on the very edge of this pink cardstock. I'll just wrap the ends around the back and then adhere it to my card. So it adds just a little bit of sparkle. If I had used the wider width, it would have added more of that holographic sparkle, but I really wanted just a subtle bit of sparkle. So I'm just going to adhere this on some green cardstock and then again on this gray cardstock. Put it on my card base, and now I'm going to work on the image. I have a stitched circle die cut and then also a scallop circle die cut. Adhere those 2 together. Put some of that scrap cardstock on the upper and lower areas. The 2 flowers I'm going to be using are some of the cut aparts on that 12 by 12 sheet. I just fussy cut those images out. And I do leave just that thin white border around the images. I know some people are experts at fussy cutting and will go all the way to the edge, but that's not my gift. I'm just going to use some liquid adhesive to adhere the 2 flowers. Put the larger one on the right hand side and then tuck the smaller one to the left. And just to make sure they're going to stay in place, I'm going to put my acrylic block on top for a little added weight. And it did sit there longer than that quick second. I've already gone ahead and stamped out the sentiment. This is greetings. I'm going to put a foam square on the right hand side where it hangs off of that circle. And then just a finishing touch using some more of the new peel offs. Really liking these. So I selected this silver color and I'm using the circles. I'm going to use all 3 of the sizes, put a couple of them in the upper right hand corner, and then a few of them in the lower left hand corner. Just trying to decide if I wanted to add any around the flowers. So these are a nice substitution for sequins. And I think that's why I ended up not using very many sequins this time. I was too busy playing with the new peel offs. So now moving on to card number 9. I'm doing some ink blending using some Distress Oxide inks. I have the Speckled Egg and also the Bundled Sage colors. So I'm starting with that green color first. Just adding some ink to the background. I'm using Pink and Main's ergonomic blender brush. This is so easy to use and you can get a nice smooth blend. So now I'm adding some of the speckled egg in the blue color, going back to the green. So I'll just keep going back and forth, trying to get a nice blend. And I think by the end, I should have added a little more blue. I think it sort of faded away later on. I did use my heat gun and made sure that all of that ink was dry. And now I'm going to do some heat embossing using one of the images in the stamp set. I first pre-treated the area with some anti-static powder, and I'm using my Mini Misty just to make sure I have a nice solid impression. So I'll just ink up that stamp using some Versamark ink, and I end up stamping it 2 times. And then I'm using some of Love From Lizi's embossing powder. This is the Platinum Tiara color. So I missed a couple little areas. I'm just going to dump a little more powder on there, wipe away some of the strays. And I'll get my heat gun and heat set this. This is a great alternative if you're like me and you don't do a lot of coloring. But doing the heat embossing still adds all of that detail and a little extra sparkle. So I'm going to cut out this panel using a stitched rectangle die, and then for the background layer I used a scallop rectangle die. For the sentiment, I stamped this on some white cardstock, and I'm just going to add that piece right underneath the image. Using some more of the peel-offs, putting one above and below that sentiment. And right now that white looks really white, but since I'm going to have a little bit of the card base peeking out, it'll balance it out. So I'm just going to add this piece onto that scalloped rectangle. I am going to use some liquid adhesive just to make sure it's going to stay in place. Whenever you do heat embossing, it does warp that paper just slightly. And then I'll add this panel onto my card base. Got some of my ATG off of the edge, so I had to tuck that back in. And again, I'm going to use just a little extra adhesive just to make sure everything will stay together. So now you can see with that outside edge of the card base, it ties in nicely with the white for the sentiment. So just some finishing touches. I'm using the Nuvo drops, adding quite a few of them around the image and then also the sentiment. Overall, this design is very simple, but I think with all those little extra touches, this turned out really lovely. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 9. Now moving on to my final card, this is card number 10. This sketch is from OWH, it's number 183. I'm using this beautiful floral paper for the background, and then some more of that green chipped paint wall look. Not sure what that's actually called, but I do end up using it quite a bit. For this strip going across the card, I'm just using some light peach cardstock that I have on hand. Adding a little bit of cardstock to the right hand side just to keep everything nice and even. I'm going to add a few of the gold Love From Lizi peel-offs just right on the outside edge of that peach cardstock. I'll tuck those ends behind, attach this to my cardstock. Generally, I add an additional 1/8 of an inch for my cardstock layers, but for this background, I did add an extra 1/4 of an inch. Whenever my background piece is mostly white, I like to have a wider cardstock layer. For the image on the card, I'm using one of the stickers from the sticker sheet, and this was actually the reason I selected this sketch. I wanted to find a sketch that featured about a 2 by 2 inch image, and this sketch worked out perfectly. I'm also using the sentiment sticker, You Make My Heart Smile, and I'm just going to layer this on that same reddish cardstock. And then I'll add it to this strip going across the card. And then finishing touches, I'm using some more of the new peel-offs, this time in the gold color, and I'm using the largest circles. So it's putting 3 of them on the right hand side, following the sketch fairly closely. I want to make sure I got them nice and straight. And then here's just a quick peek at all of the new peel-offs. Sorry, it was a really quick peek. Thought I was holding that there a little longer. So I'm also adding a small gold heart above the word heart. So there is my finished card, and that is card number 10. Now here's just a quick recap of the 10 cards I made using Love From Lizi's July 2020 card kit. This kit has already sold out. It sold out very quickly this month. The only way to guarantee receiving a kit is to sign up to subscribe. I have provided a link in the description box if you are interested in subscribing or want to check out any of the add-ons. Now here's everything I have left over. I have 2 full sheets of the cardstock and a lot of the gray, a bunch of the 12 by 12 paper, lots of little bits and pieces. There's some scraps of the 6 by 6 paper and also 3 full sheets. A lot of the stickers. Bunch of the ribbon still left. I have most of the sequins since I was busy using the new peel-offs. I have 4 of those pre-tied bows. I never did use any of the clothespins or these little heart buttons. I'll save those for a future project. I still have 4 more of the wood pieces. And then I have both of the dies. I never did use the butterfly. And then of course the stamp set, the Nuvo drops, and the peel-off sheet, which I only used 1 piece simply because I was using some of the other colors instead. So I still have lots of stuff left over for making more cards. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.